I stood behind the counter, trying to deal with the whirlwind of emotions still roiling me from my dismissal the day before. The humiliation still burned beneath my skin, as if every customer who walked in could see the mark the incident had left on me. The cafe was quietly bustling, the murmur of conversations mingling with the rustle of cutlery and the sound of the coffee machine, creating a quotidian symphony that, at that moment, was incapable of calming me. Then the door creaked and for a moment the world stopped. The mysterious man from the previous night entered, walking with calm confidence, followed by the dog I had fed. Their entrance was like a shockwave that reverberated throughout the restaurant. The entire clientele seemed to freeze for a second, their gazes fixed on the grey-haired man and the dog, who, unlike his first visit, now sported a clean coat and a contented look. The man, with a presence that seemed to command respect, turned directly to me, his eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and determination. "Lucas," he began, his voice firm but gentle, "I think we have something to work out here." My heart raced. What did he want? Why was he here again now with the dog? Before I could ask a question, he turned to my former boss, who was standing near the kitchen, with a look of disbelief and discomfort. The boss tried to maintain his composure, but his posture betrayed his growing nervousness. "I'm Frederico, the owner of this building," the man announced, his voice echoing throughout the room. "And I have some unfinished business with you." My former boss's face paled. He clearly wasn't prepared for this. The revelation hit the restaurant like a storm, and I felt the electricity in the air, almost palpable. Frederico didn't wait for an answer, continuing, "Last night I met a young man with a heart as big as this building. He was fired for an act of kindness that many would overlook." The silence was deafening. I felt a warmth spread through my body, a mixture of gratitude and impending justice. Frederico gestured to the dog, now sitting calmly beside him. This dog was touched by Lucas's gesture, and today I'm here to ensure he receives the recognition he deserves. I didn't know what to say. My former boss's eyes were fixed on the floor, his hands trembling slightly. Frederico stepped forward, his presence dominating the space. "As of this moment, you are fired," he declared, the sentence cutting through the air like a blade. "And Lucas, if you accept, I'd like to offer you the chance to manage a new cafe I'm opening." My legs nearly gave out from under me. It was too much to process. I felt an intense, overwhelming joy, but also a surreal disbelief. How could things change so quickly from one day to the next? "Lucas," Frederico called again, pulling me back to reality. I looked into his eyes, seeing a confidence in them I hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. "Do you accept?" My heart pounded, and for a moment it felt like the whole restaurant was waiting for my answer. But before I could respond, a need to explain everything, to share how I got to this point, overcame me. "I accept, but first, I need to go back in time to explain how this all began," I said, feeling the weight of the words as everyone around waited for the story that was about to be unveiled. The day began like any other, but there was a strange feeling in the air, as if something was about to change. I sat behind the coffee counter, trying to keep my mind occupied with routine tasks. However, my mind constantly returned to the previous day's events, reliving the humiliation of my unfair dismissal. I tried to convince myself I had done the right thing, but uncertainty hung like a cloud over my head. The sound of the door creaking brought me back to the present. When I looked up, I saw the grey-haired man enter the cafe, his posture exuding authority, followed by the same dog I'd fed. The last thing I expected was to see them again. The dog looked transformed, his fur clean, and he wore a look of satisfaction that warmed my heart. The conversations around me ceased, and I could feel all eyes turning to the man and the dog. There was something magnetic about the man's presence, something that demanded immediate attention. He walked directly toward me, and my heart began to beat faster, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. "Lucas," he said, his voice like an anchor, firm and sure. "I think we have something to work out here." I could barely breathe. What did he want with me? Why was he here again? Before I could ask a question, he turned to my former boss, who was leaning against the kitchen entrance, his look wavering between disbelief and panic. "I'm Frederico, the owner of this building," the man announced, his message echoing throughout the space. The name rang in my ears, and suddenly everything made sense. My former boss paled visibly, his composure crumbling under Frederico's incisive gaze. Frederico continued, without giving time for a response. Last night, I met a young man with a heart as big as this building. He was fired for an act of kindness that many would overlook. He gestured to the dog, who was now sitting patiently beside him, as if understanding the importance of this moment. The silence in the cafe was almost tangible, each of Frederico's words carrying weight and meaning. I felt a mixture of embarrassment and righteousness, as if someone was finally seeing who I really was. Frederico stepped forward, his presence dominating the space with unquestionable authority. "Effective this moment, you are fired," he declared, his sentence cutting through the air like a sharp blade. My former boss seemed to shrink under the weight of the words, his usual arrogance melting away. "And Lucas, if you accept, I'd like to offer you the chance to manage a new cafe I'm opening." The words hit me like a wave, and I felt my legs nearly give way under the impact of surprise and joy. It was an opportunity I had never dared dream of, a twist that seemed to have been taken from a story I never imagined living. "Lucas," Frederico called again, his voice bringing me back to reality. Our eyes met, and I saw a trust and anticipation in his eyes that made me want to respond. "Do you accept?" The moment seemed to stretch on, as if the world were waiting for my answer. And while everyone around us waited, a need to explain everything, to share the journey that brought me here, took hold of me. "I accept, but first, I need to go back in time to explain how this all began," I said, feeling the weight of the words as they hung in the air, promising to reveal the story that was about to be unraveled. I needed to go back in time, more precisely to a period that still lives in a painful corner of my memory. It was an ordinary day, like so many others, when I was just another hard-working employee at the bustling downtown diner. Young and eager to prove myself, I dedicated myself to my work with an intensity that, in retrospect, may have been naive. The memory of that specific moment remains vivid in my mind. The clock was almost midnight, and the diner was beginning to empty. I was at the register, organizing the bills and watching the door slowly close after the last customers left. That's when I noticed Anna, a co-worker, fighting back tears as she cleaned a table. Anna was a sweet girl, always willing to help, but that night something was wrong. "Are you okay, Anna?" I asked, my voice low so as not to attract attention. She hesitated before answering, her eyes shining with a sadness she tried to hide. "It's just a lot going on at home. I have to leave early today, but the boss isn't interested in excuses," she mumbled, her voice almost breaking. I knew Anna was raising 2 younger siblings on her own, and that her mother was sick. So the thought of her not being able to leave early to go home broke my heart. I looked around, making sure no one was paying attention, and said, "Go, I'll cover your shift. I'll work something out with the boss." She hesitated, but the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. "Thank you, Lucas. I don't know how to thank you," she said before rushing out, giving me one last look of gratitude. The night dragged on as I finished my work and Anna's, feeling a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction at having helped someone in need. However, the confrontation with the boss would come the next morning. He called me into his office, and I knew it wouldn't be a friendly encounter. His gaze was hard, devoid of any trace of understanding. "Lucas, I understand you covered Anna's shift yesterday," he began, his voice thick with disdain. "This isn't an act of charity. We have rules here." I tried to explain that Anna had an emergency, I replied, keeping my voice calm, but he held up his hand to interrupt me. "Spare me your excuses. This isn't a shelter," he snapped, the coldness in his words cutting through me like a sharp blade. "You'll stay after hours today at no extra pay, so you understand that the rules are followed here." I left the office with a lump in my throat, the weight of humiliation settling on my shoulders. The overtime that night seemed endless. As I mopped the already shiny floor and rearranged the chairs for the umpteenth time, a silent anger grew within me. Not at the penalty itself, but at what it represented. The lack of empathy, the inability to see beyond the cold, rigid rules. In that forced solitude, I swore to myself that one day I would work in a place where humanity was more valuable than a simple time clock. I didn't know when or how that would happen, but that silent promise became a flame that would guide me in the years to come, shaping my worldview and my desire to create a space where acts of kindness were recognized and valued. Over time, I realized that that episode, though painful, was one of the first building blocks of who I wanted to be. It taught me the importance of looking beyond appearances and never ever letting indifference become my norm. I didn't know it then, but this experience would be crucial to the choices that awaited me in the future, a silent preparation for the day when I would finally have the opportunity to turn dreams into reality. The night fell heavily on me, bringing with it the cold reality of my unfair dismissal and the weight of uncertainty about what the future held. After a day filled with turbulent emotions, I was finally home, but the feeling of defeat enveloped me like a suffocating blanket. I threw myself onto the couch, my head full of conflicting thoughts, while the silence of the house amplified the loneliness I felt. The streetlights cast soft shadows across the room, and I stood there motionless, trying to make sense of what had happened. The dog I'd fed the night before seemed to be the only one who understood my simple act of kindness, but that hadn't been enough to prevent my dismissal. The injustice of the situation still burned within me, a lingering flame of frustration and anger. Then a soft knock on the door shook me from my reverie. I hesitated for a moment, surprised that someone had arrived so late. I slowly got up and walked to the door, each step heavy with the doubt of who it could be. As I opened the door, my heart gave an unexpected leap. There stood the mysterious man, the same one I'd briefly glimpsed while feeding the dog. He was dressed simply, but there was an aura of dignity in his bearing. His eyes, though tired, shone with genuine curiosity. Beside him, the dog I'd fed the night before, now clean and with a peaceful look in his eyes, seemed almost to be smiling at me. "Good evening, Lucas," he said, his voice calm as the night breeze. "May I come in?" I was surprised and a little suspicious, but something in his tone made me take a step back and gesture for him to come in. He settled into one of the living room's armchairs, while the dog lay down beside him in an almost guarding posture. "Sorry to just show up like this unannounced," he began, looking me straight in the eye, "but I felt I needed to talk to you. I heard about what happened today." A mixture of shame and anger surged through me again, but I forced myself to maintain my composure. "Yes, I was fired," I admitted with a sigh, trying not to let the bitterness show in my voice, "for feeding a stray dog food that was supposed to go to waste. Apparently that was considered an unforgivable crime." He shook his head, a sad smile crossing his face. "Most wouldn't understand, but I was intrigued by your attitude. Few have the courage to care, especially when there's no personal gain involved." I felt touched by his words, as if he were seeing beyond the superficial, beyond what others chose to ignore. "I guess I've always believed that small actions can make a difference," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're right," he nodded, his gaze growing more intense. "You didn't just lose a job. You gained something far more valuable, a clear conscience and the certainty that you did the right thing." His words resonated with me, spreading a sense of relief I hadn't known I needed. "Who are you?" I asked, finally allowing my curiosity to take over. Where are my manners?" He laughed softly. "I'm Frederic, just someone who cares about seeing good done." The conversation unfolded naturally, as if I was speaking with an old friend. Frederico listened patiently as I detailed my experience, not just the previous day, but the entire journey that had led me to that point. Each word seemed to ease some of the tension I was carrying, and his attentive gaze encouraged me to continue. When he finally got up to leave, I felt strangely lighter. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder and said, "Lucas, sometimes one door closes so that a bigger and better one can open. Don't lose faith in your goodness." With a nod and a final look that seemed to promise we would see each other again, he and the dog disappeared into the night. I stood at the door for a while, watching the stars, feeling a renewed hope settle within me. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected visit was the beginning of something I couldn't yet fully comprehend. The cafe was busier than usual that morning, a constant murmur of conversation and laughter filling the air as I tried to absorb the magnitude of what had happened the day before. Frederico's unexpected arrival, his support, and the offer of a new opportunity still echoed in my mind, like a pleasant dream from which I feared waking at any moment. As I placed orders and scanned the counter with a watchful eye, the atmosphere around me seemed to pulse with a different energy. The customers, many of whom were familiar faces, gave me curious glances and sometimes even veiled encouragement. I wasn't sure what they expected, but I sensed something was about to happen. And then, as if fate were following a meticulously written script, the cafe door opened again with a familiar creak, Silence fell over the room the instant Frederico entered, his presence dominating the space with a quiet authority. Beside him, the same stray dog I'd fed walked, its tail wagging happily, as if it knew it was part of something important. My former boss, who until that moment had been busy behind the counter, looked up and froze. His expression changed from indifference to alert in the blink of an eye. It was clear that Frederico's presence made him uncomfortable, and for a brief moment, I felt a surge of satisfaction at his nervousness. Frederico walked to the center of the cafe, his posture straight and his gaze steady. He paused briefly, scanning the room with his discerning eyes before addressing my former boss directly. "We need to talk," he declared, his voice cutting through the silence like a sharp knife. My former boss's face paled, and I could see his hands trembling slightly. He tried to maintain his composure, but panic was visible in his eyes. "Of course, Mr. Frederico," he replied, trying to sound confident, but his voice betrayed his apprehension. Frederico nodded, then turned to me, his gaze conveying a confidence that sent a wave of warmth and gratitude through me. "Lucas," he began, "your actions speak louder than any words, and today I'm here to fix that." I could hardly believe what was about to happen. Part of me wanted to intervene, but another part, wiser, perhaps, knew it was time to let Frederico speak for me. "What happened here was more than just a matter of domestic politics," Frederico continued, his voice resonating with implacable calm. "It was a matter of character, and I value character above all else." The silence in the cafe was absolute, all eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them. My former boss was speechless, his face a mask of confusion and embarrassment. Frederico didn't wait for an answer before continuing. "Effective this moment, you are dismissed," he announced, each word carrying a weight that left no room for objection. The sentence hung in the air, and I felt a wave of relief sweep through the room, as if everyone had been holding their breath and could finally let it out. My former boss staggered back, reality washing over him like a crushing tide. He looked around, seeking support where there was none. The previously apathetic clientele now watched with a mixture of surprise and silent approval. Frederico turned to me once more, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Lucas, you deserve more than this place can offer," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'd like to offer you the chance to run a new cafe, a place where people like you can flourish." My emotions were a whirlwind and I could barely find words. I accept," I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. It was a chance to start over, to prove not only to others but to myself that acts of kindness were not in vain. Frederico patted me on the shoulder, his eyes filled with silent understanding. "Remember, Lucas, what really matters are the people we touch with our actions." As he left, his faithful dog at his side, I felt a new energy spread through the cafe. It was as if a new era was beginning, a promise of better days built on the foundation of empathy and true human connection. And there in the middle of it all, was I, ready to embrace the future with a renewed heart and a clear vision of what truly mattered. The next morning arrived with a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper promises of new beginnings. As I walked to the address Frederico had given me, a mix of nervousness and excitement pulsed in my chest. The city was still waking, and the first rays of sunlight tinged the buildings with a golden hue, as if the world itself were conspiring to make that day special. My destination. A small space in the heart of the neighborhood, where Frederico planned to open his new cafe. From afar, the building looked ordinary, but there was something special about the way it stood out, as if waiting for a transformation that was about to begin. Upon entering, I was greeted by Frederico, who was already there, surveying the place with appraising eyes. He turned to me with a warm smile, and I couldn't help but feel that somehow this encounter was destiny working its mysterious ways. "Lucas, welcome to your future," Frederico said, gesturing around with a sweeping gesture. "This place has potential, and with you at the helm, I'm certain it will become something extraordinary." I looked around, taking in every detail. The space was empty, but I could imagine the possibilities. The walls awaited decorations that would tell stories. The tables would witness conversation and laughter, and the air would be filled with the irresistible aroma of fresh coffee and dreams being fulfilled. "It's incredible, Frederico," I replied, my voice choked with emotion. "I never imagined I'd have a chance like this." Frederico approached, his gaze firm and encouraging. "Lucas, The world needs leaders who value people, someone who sees beyond profit and prioritizes positive impact. I saw that in you, and I believe you can make a difference. These words touched my heart deeply. For so long I felt my actions went unnoticed, but here was someone who saw the value in them, and that gave me a confidence I didn't know I had. I want this cafe to be a place where everyone feels welcome, I said, ideas starting to flow. A place where people can find not only good food, but also comfort and community. Frederico nodded, satisfied. And it will be, Lucas. I know it will be. We spent the morning discussing plans and ideas, each detail a step toward realizing that dream. Frederico gave me the freedom to create, encouraging me to pour my heart and soul into the project. And I did, with every fiber of my being. As I left the cafe at the end of the day, I felt a new determination take root within me. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for every challenge. Because in the end, this wasn't just about running a cafe. It was about creating a space where kindness and empathy would always be welcome. I knew this was just the beginning of a new phase in my life, and the prospect of what lay ahead was both exciting and daunting. But for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And it gave me a sense of peace I'd never experienced before. Transforming that empty space into a vibrant and welcoming cafe was a task I embraced with more fervor than any other in my life. Each day brought a new challenge, but also a new opportunity to shape something truly meaningful. Frederico gave me the freedom to create, and I dove headfirst into the task, infusing every detail with passion and care. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, choosing the decor, defining the menu, training the staff. I wanted the cafe to reflect a community spirit, a place where every customer felt at home and where every employee was valued for what they brought to the place. I chose comfortable furniture and warm colors that invited people to feel at home, as if they were in their own living rooms. The menu was carefully crafted to include not only delicious dishes, but also options that could accommodate a variety of diets and preferences. I wanted anyone who walked through those doors to find something they liked, something that would make their day a little better. And so the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods began to waft through the neighborhood, attracting a growing clientele. But more than the ambiance or the food, I knew the true heart of the cafe would be the service. My team and I strive to know our customers by name, remember their preferences, and make them feel like we were more than just a place to grab a coffee. I wanted to offer an experience where every interaction was genuine and warm, where everyone who walked in could feel the impact of a genuine smile or a friendly conversation. I remember one particular morning when a gentleman walked in for the first time. He looked tired, his steps dragging as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I greeted him with a smile and asked how he was. His eyes, previously clouded with fatigue, lit up, and he told me a brief story about his life, about how much that small gesture of kindness had meant to him that day. It was exactly this kind of connection I was hoping to create, and knowing we were achieving it was a reward no amount of money could buy. Over time, the cafe became a popular meeting place, not only because we offered excellent coffee, but because people came seeking that sense of belonging, that warm welcome that had become our trademark. Students came to study, professionals held meetings, friends met for long conversations, and even tourists stopped by to see what all the fuss was about. My personal success paralleled that of the cafe. I felt fulfilled like never before, each day bringing a new reason to smile. The respect I earned came not only from my role as a manager, but from the way I chose to lead. I treated my team like family, and they reciprocated with dedication and enthusiasm. Together, we created an environment where everyone felt valued, where teamwork was more than a catchphrase. It was a lived and shared reality. Frederico visited frequently, always with a satisfied smile. He never failed to remind me how proud he was of what we had built together. "You did it, Lucas," he told me on one such visit, his voice brimming with pride. "You turned a dream into reality and touched more lives than you can imagine." The recognition was gratifying, but what truly filled me with joy was seeing people leave the cafe with smiles on their faces, knowing that in some way we had been a part of their day. And so the cafe flourished, not just as a business, but as a symbol of everything I believed, that kindness, empathy, and an open heart would always find a way to transform lives. The following months were a roller coaster of emotions and challenges that tested my resolve and creativity. The cafe I now managed was thriving, and each day brought a new opportunity to grow and learn. However, even as I dedicated myself to my new venture, a part of me couldn't help but think back to the restaurant where I'd worked for so many years before everything changed. The memories of that place, some good, some not so much, still lingered like shadows in my mind. It was during a quiet afternoon while organizing some invoices that I heard the first whispers. A group of regulars were talking quietly in a corner of the cafe, but the words that escaped their lips reached me with crystal clarity. "Have you heard about the restaurant around the corner? They seem to be losing customers, and things aren't looking good. They say the food isn't the same and the service has gone down a lot." My heart skipped a beat, and a storm of thoughts coursed through me. I remembered what it was like to work there, the dedication some of my colleagues and I put into every detail, even when we weren't properly recognized. He knew that without the genuine commitment of a dedicated team, any business was doomed to struggle. As the days passed, more rumors spread. Customers who had previously frequented the old restaurant now showed up at my cafe, some bringing stories of disappointing experiences, others simply seeking a more welcoming atmosphere and a meal made with heart. Lucas, a former customer of the restaurant, called to me one day as I passed his table. "I was there last week, and I can tell it's not the same anymore. Since you left, it seems like they've lost their essence, you know? It's a shame." I thanked him for his words, but inside I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me lamented the decline of a place that had been a part of my life, but another part understood that it was a consequence of management that didn't value what truly mattered: people. Without the support of caring employees, without the positive energy that emanated from simple gestures, the restaurant was sinking into its own indifference. One day, as I was closing the cash register at the end of the day, I was surprised by an unexpected visitor. Anna, the same co-worker I had helped some time ago, hurried in. Her eyes, always bright, now held a shadow of concern. "Lucas, I didn't know who else to turn to," she began, her voice a thread of hope mixed with despair. "You know how bad things are at the restaurant. Many of us have left, and the few who remain are exhausted and unmotivated." I looked at her, fully understanding the extent of her frustration. "Anna, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I know it's not easy, but you need to do what's best for you. Find a place where your work is valued." She nodded, a sad smile playing on her lips. I just wish they had realized sooner that people are what make a place special. As we talked, I realized this was the most valuable lesson I could have learned: the importance of recognizing and nurturing the true heart of any business, human capital. And as I reflected on this, something inside me calmed. The restaurant, once a significant part of my story, was now following a path I couldn't control. But I was certain that in time they would find their way, just as I had found mine. Driving home that night, I felt an unexpected peace. I knew the cafe I ran was now a reflection of everything I'd learned and everything I'd become. And as I moved forward, I was determined to never forget this crucial lesson: to value what truly matters. That morning began like any other, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air as sunlight filtered through the windows, casting dancing patterns on the cafe floor. I was behind the counter, checking the bean inventory and making a mental list of the day's tasks, when I noticed a figure standing outside. The man hesitated, his hunched posture suggesting an invisible weight on his shoulders. I recognized him before he even walked in. My former boss, the man who until recently had run the restaurant where I'd worked for years. He looked different now, older, tired, with deep circles under his eyes that emphasized the wear and tear on his skin. There was something vulnerable in his expression, a shadow of desperation that didn't quite match the arrogant boss he'd once ruled with an iron fist. He finally entered, and the bell above the door announced his arrival. The usual buzz of the cafe died down as the nearby customers watched the scene curiously. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what was to come. "Lucas," he said, his voice hoarse and hesitant. There was no trace of the former haughtiness. "We need to talk." I nodded, signaling for him to follow me to a corner table away from prying ears. As we walked, I felt a mix of emotions resurface: frustration, anger, but also a strange sense of compassion. He looked defeated, and for a brief moment I remembered how I'd felt the day I was fired, lost and aimless. We sat down, and he began to speak bluntly. "You must know the restaurant is struggling," he admitted, his eyes fixed on the table, avoiding mine. "Since you left, things haven't been the same. We've lost customers, and the remaining staff isn't enough to maintain the standard." His confession was a silent acknowledgement of the value my colleagues and I possessed, an acknowledgement that never came when we needed it most. I remained silent, giving him space to continue. I came here to ask for your help," he finally said, with a vulnerability I never expected from him. "You've made this cafe a success, and I need you to save the restaurant. Maybe a partnership or some form of guidance." His plea took me by surprise, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, remembering the years of unrecognized hard work, the unpaid overtime, the moments when my kindness was seen as weakness. But another part of me, a part that had learned to value empathy and compassion, couldn't ignore the evident suffering before me. "Listen," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I understand what you're going through, but I also need to be honest. I've learned to focus on people, on creating an environment where they feel valued and respected, where actions speak louder than words." He nodded, absorbing my words with a look of resignation. "I know I messed up, Lucas, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to change. Just help me start over." I looked at him, trying to see beyond the boss who once didn't care. Maybe there was a chance for him, a possibility of redemption if he were truly willing to change. But I also knew I couldn't simply give up what I'd built, my vision and the values that guided me. "I'll think about it," I said finally, knowing I needed time to consider my options. "And if I decide to help, it will be on my terms." He nodded again, hope lighting in his eyes. "Thank you, Lucas, I really appreciate it." When he left, the tension around the table dissipated, and I stood there for a moment, reflecting on the strange twists and turns life can take. Perhaps, I thought, this was another test from the universe, a chance to apply everything I'd learned about leadership and empathy, about the value of each individual on a team. As the coffee returned to its usual rhythm, I realized this choice wasn't just about business. It was about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to impact the world around me. And while the decision wasn't yet clear, I knew that whatever path I took, it would be guided by the principles that had brought me here. The next morning arrived with a weight of decisions on my shoulders. The meeting with my former boss still reverberated in my mind, and the complexity of his requests demanded careful reflection. The cafe was opening its doors, the routine warmed by greetings and familiar smiles, but my mind remained stuck on the crossroads of possibilities unfolding before me. As I brewed an espresso, the rich aroma of coffee helped center my thoughts. I wondered what truly mattered to me. It was a question that seemed to echo in the back of my mind, prompted by past experiences and the lessons learned along the way. I spent the morning amid the hustle and bustle of the cafe, watching the customers come and go, each with their own stories, their personal journeys briefly crossing mine. I've always believed that every interaction, no matter how small, has the potential to transform someone's day. It was this belief that guided me, that shaped the essence of the cafe I manage with such care. In a moment of pause, I found a quiet corner and let my thoughts wander. I remembered the late nights worked, the relentless effort to achieve a vision that seemed so distant. I remembered the people I'd met along the way, each of them contributing to what my cafe had become, a refuge, a temporary home for those seeking a simple gesture of kindness amidst the daily chaos. That's how I realized that my former boss's proposal, while tempting in essence, deviated from the path I'd chosen. I reflected on the people who formed the beating heart of my cafe, the smiling faces of my employees and customers who always gave me the strength to keep going. They were the ones contributing to the cafe's success, not an immediate financial return or a partnership out of convenience. When the coffee finally settled down after lunch, I grabbed my phone and typed a quick message to my former boss. The words came easily, a clear expression of my decision. "I appreciate the offer, but I've learned to focus on what really matters, people. I wish you success on your path, but I've chosen to follow my own where human value is what matters most." I sent the message, certain I was doing the right thing. I felt an inner peace, a relief that spread through me like a comforting warmth. It was at that moment that I realized how far I had come. How much I had grown since the beginning of this journey, full of unexpected twists and turns and valuable lessons. And as the day drew to a close, I decided to stroll around the cafe, taking in all we'd accomplished. The tables were filled with lively conversation, and the sound of joyful laughter filled the air. Outside, a group of dogs played happily near the entrance, enjoying the attention of customers who stopped to pet them. I watched the scene with a satisfied smile, feeling a sense of gratitude overwhelmed. As the dogs pranced around, their tails wagging in pure joy, I knew this was the image I wanted to carry with me. A symbol of what we had built together, a place where kindness and humanity would always prevail. In that moment, I realized I had found my purpose. And as the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant colors, I felt triumphant. Because at the end of the day, true success isn't just about numbers or external recognition, but about knowing we've made a difference in people's lives, one small act of kindness at a time.